Thanks for coming tonight to celebrate issue number 122 with ZYZZYVA. And we want to welcome you to our virtual library, and the San Francisco Public Library would like to acknowledge that we occupy the unceded and ancestral homeland of the Ramutush Ohlone peoples, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. We recognize that we benefit from living and working on their traditional homeland, and as uninvited guests, we affirm their sovereign rights as First Peoples. We wish to pay our respects to the ancestors, elders, and relatives of the Ramutush community. And I'm going to throw two more links in the chat right now, which one is an amazing resource and reading list. The librarians love to make reading lists of Indigenous cultures, particularly in the Bay Area, organizations you can check into, read about, donate to, and then a great map that lets you know what native land you're occupying. Now I'm going to breeze through the amazing lineup of events we have at SFPL, and this is just scratching the surface, sfpl.org/events. And we started kicking off our more than a month events last Friday, and we are celebrating more than a month at the library is our version of Black History. And this overall theme for this year's celebration is Black health and wellness. And you can check out our beautiful art, which we curate, and we work with local artists each cultural awareness campaign. This beautiful art is by Tiffany Conway, and you can see the meditative and the ancestors, the beautiful calming effect it has. And Tiffany will be in our virtual library in February, so look out for that. San Francisco Public Library has a On the Same Page, which is a bi-monthly read that has been happening for 17 years. I gotta think that's like the longest book club ever. So we have selected Jessamine Stanley, who has her second book out, Yoke, My Yoga of Self-Acceptance. And you can find this book at all of your locations, all of our library locations, and Bookmobile. Pick it up today. Come to the book club on Valentine's Day. The author will not be there, but she will be there on February 27th in combo with Tamika Kasten Miller. And we have meditation every Wednesday in the African American Center with the amazing Dennis Billups, who is also famed for being in Netflix Crip Camp. So check this out. And I will remind you with COVID and the Omicron that please check before you go. Check our website. I'm having deja vu with some postponements and cancellations. So if it's an in-person program, definitely check to make sure we are still on. We have a great extraordinary photos from any camera series the last Monday of every month through April, and hoping to end this with a great photo walk through Chinatown in May. So amazing Sony artisans. We are so lucky to have them. Series of different photoshops. So come check it out, photo workshops. Looking forward to that. Scott Robert Lim and Sabrina Dang will be teaching that. And then we are scheduled for another in-person event, and this is going to be February 24th. We're celebrating the amazing Charlie Jane Anders, and by we, I mean the crew from Total SF and their podcast, that's Heather Knight and Peter Hartlaub. And we're going to be totally celebrating Charlie Jane, specifically Victories Greater Than Death, but we all know Charlie Jane is a champion of authors and books and bookstores. So there's so much to celebrate on this one. So you can come to the Corrette, our beautiful Corrette, lots of space, holds 250 people. We can spread out. We will be doing all the COVID measures, or you can join us streaming either in Zoom land or on YouTube. And just a reminder, we can't do any of this without our friends of the San Francisco Public Library who help us sponsor all of these amazing events. All right, so I'm going to now turn it over to ZYZZYVA, and this is for their issue number 122. And if you don't know about ZYZZYVA, it is an award-winning literary magazine founded in San Francisco in 1985. And it's gone beyond, it's gone worldwide. And I'm going to turn it over right now to managing editor, Oscar Villalon. Take it away, Oscar.
Thank you, Anissa. Thank you, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're going to have readings from 4 of our contributors this evening. Among them, Shelby Kinney-Lang, C.J.A., Marie Mutsuki Mockett, and Dean Rader. I am Oscar Villalon. I am the managing editor of ZYZZYVA. I'll talk a little bit more about the issue after we do our first couple of readings. As you can see from the slide, we called it the international or the trans-international issue. I will unpack that for you. It doesn't trip off the tongue quite as well as I thought it would at the time where when I said that's a great subtitle for that. So just wait on that. Let me begin first of all with the person I know in the farthest time zone. God bless him. Shelby Kinney-Lang. He is a writer and educator whose work has appeared in Green Mountain Review, Joyland, Bellevue Literary Review, and elsewhere. And he currently lives in, I think, pretty frigid New England. His work titled Snake and Submarine appears in this issue 122. To please welcome Shelby Kinney-Lang.
Hello. Thank you for that kind introduction, Oscar. I wanted to thank Oscar, and I wanted to thank Laura at ZYZZYVA, plus the San Francisco Public Library for hosting us. I'll be reading for about 6 minutes from the beginning of the piece. This is called Snake and Submarine. Not long ago, a friend in California, call her Esme, became severely ill with a rare and rapidly progressing cancer, and has been posting updates about her condition on a medical blog, which appears on my Facebook feed. In an entry from last month, she describes all the ways in which she has been saved. She is saved in Christ, of course, but also, and she doesn't mean to sound trite to list this second after Christ, saved by Britney Spears' 4th studio album, In the Zone, which she played on repeat when she was a freshman in high school and estranged from God, uncertain for travails which at the time felt monumental, were possible to surmount. She was saved by Glenn Gould and by Degrassi and by Richard Fleischer's fantastic voyage, in which a submarine crew is shrunk infinitesimally and sent into a scientist's dying body. I pay particular attention when she says Tolstoy has saved her, that writing can save, or she hopes that it can, because this is how I know her from a class in college in which we read Tolstoy in translation and often spent long Massachusetts afternoons talking with excitement about Anna Karenina. I'm not sure, I tell my wife, while we walk along a dirt road in the Berkshires adjacent to our home, what it means to be saved by Glenn Gould or Brittany or Tolstoy, if Esme means Ars Longa Vita Brevis, or if she means that from a distance some spiritual part of her has been redeemed because of these essentially faithless works, or something else entirely, something that may or may not correspond with an immaterial soul, which was always a disagreement between us during our Tolstoy conversations, that she believed such a thing existed and I did not. So as a kind of test, as an act of, I don't know, saving her, preserving what I know about her on the page, aware that I can't save anyone, that a man setting out to save a woman is a tired trope, I begin to write about a character I named Jolie, a composite. And after a few pages, if I squint, I can see in Jolie a number of people from my past, one of whom is Esme, this particular friend who wonders about the saving power of writing, hairless from chemo, 20 pounds lighter, or so the pictures she posts to Facebook show, her figure hollowed to a Monkean scream, except could it be, Esme is smiling, she's filled with joy, or affects joy, even lying in a hospital bed with a nasogastric tube taped to the front of her pale face and playing Pokemon, reverting to a childhood diversion at what is possibly the end of her 29 years of life. She reflects in her medical blog how she spends some of what might be her last moments on Earth choosing to capture and instruct virtual creatures, which as a father-to-be, I read as her displaced longing to parent a child she will likely never have. She describes how she visited an OBGYN specialist to have an ovary laparoscopically removed. It was subsequently sliced into strips that still have viable eggs, each strip of which was preserved indefinitely in liquid nitrogen. The doctors do not know to what extent the chemo and radiation will impact future fertility, Esme writes, but she and her husband plan to try to conceive when her cancer journey, as she calls it, concludes. I continue to write about Jolie, thinking about Esme, when, after a few more pages, I noticed that Jolie resembles someone I once knew. In fact, they shared the same body, a girl I met in León when we were both 19, walking the Camino de Santiago after I renounced my evangelical faith and all faith. And this American girl, whose name was M, who wanted to be a wildland firefighter, who described with the strange specificity of a mind that had the capacity to write fiction, how she'd one day own a submarine she'd navigate through dark waters. M was a devout but liberal Catholic, so that the arguments that engaged us on those belly-long summer days walking across the golden plains of Spain were among the most intellectually difficult of my life. I cannot imagine, in retrospect, anything of what we discussed was particularly well-informed, having read nearly nothing at that point in my life, save for a little Camus and Fanon, which was enough to convince me what I had secretly begun to suspect in the preceding years, that there was no God, that existence indeed preceded essence. I can still see M clearly, the honey-colored nape of her neck when her hair was up in a bun, her defined shoulders moving beneath the Gore-Tex hiking shirt in the moments before she hefted up her heavy backpack. The peculiar, lovely geometries of her face, dark chestnut eyes, oblong dimple in her right cheek. Something about the Camino drained us of all sexual tension. Our bodies became merely bodies. And if we should see each other in various states of undress, as we did each morning and evening we walked together, there was nothing about a glimpse of flesh, no matter how evocative in other contexts, that we found very interesting. We parted in Santiago de Compostela. I continued to Finisterre, the end of the earth, and watched the sunset over the Atlantic, having walked nearly 300 kilometers together, having slept by each other above or below in bunks, napping off the path side by side in the shade of a chestnut or eucalyptus tree, stinking and bloody-footed, promising to exchange emails, though of course we never did. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shelby. That was lovely. And as you can tell from that reading, it's an amazingly, I think, thoughtful and I think searching piece about friendships and death, but also just on people who are quite unlike ourselves in some ways, and and these connections that we have with them. Perhaps the surprising is for how long we maintain them, but they are there. I think probably just a mark of being human. Our next reader is a wonderful poet. C.J.A. is a Los Angeles-based poet, but also critic and essayist, and oh, God bless them, current doctoral candidate at the University of Southern California. Their poetry has appeared in issues 107 and 112. We've had the opportunity and the privilege, to share with our readers their work, and also in this newest issue. C.J.A., will you please grace us with some of your verse?
Hello, thank you, Oscar, and thank you, Laura, too, and thank you to ZYZZYVA and the SF Public Library for having me. I lived in Oakland for 5 years, and so this is like very heartwarming. I feel like I'm back, but I'm not physically, but that's okay. So the poem that this issue comes from a book that I've been working on for the past 3 years, and I'm going to be reading that poem and 2 other ones tonight. And the poems, it's kind of a diary, what I'm working on right now. And so the poems have like sort of time context. And so I'll give that to you as I read them, but other than that, I won't give too much background. Okay, so this first poem was written when I was living in Oakland and I was doing a lot of swimming in the bay. I swam with the South End Rowing Club in Aquatic Park. This is pre-pandemic, by the way. The arrowy black feathers on the water, angled alchemical in subtle slants and shifts of the vertical around Alcatraz, are sails. It's funny, my sort of distortion, not egregious but overly flattering in its error. My eye dipped in reckoning in the water too. The poet chants time in her way and I in mine, not egregious but overly flattening, bobbing as I am pleasurably on my back. Watch one arrowy feather swing swift, tune or turn flat the wide way. One full sail sped toward only mute degrees beyond my me. They're bobbing, as sweetly sort of severed. Moral now, or metaphor, the wildfire sky so orange and grieving. Little nub on the water, surveyor of the flightless seams that are the feather's wakes. What do you know? All this fathomless thinking. So the second poem takes place right at the start of the pandemic and also the start of a long and painful breakup that I went through. It's called Dear Live Customer Care Agent, Richard Parker. You are very polite, but if you truly cared, you'd ship to me immediately a year's supply of surface disinfectant and toilet tissue, for though we own a little squirt bottle with a strange nozzle marketed as an on-the-go bidet, we are loath to use it and require just a little glimmer of normalcy in the fulfillment of our duty to God and country and economic recovery, online shopping. Yes, Richard, you are too polite to be human. More likely you're a bot, an algorithm given an Anglo name intended to call the quote average user during this quote difficult time of long call wait times, although I cannot help imagine you corporeal, dare I say sexy, chatting surrounded by clutter just as I am, crafting bite by bite a transactional intimacy on the flat screen contagion has made of romance. All these forms you demand I fill. In your keenly intentional politeness, you never fail to thank me like some depraved Wildian gentleman manipulating me with courtesy, always including the requisite exclamation mark. I'm sorry about that. Wish I could help you. That so conveys a sincerity of tone. After all, you are an agent of my care. But what I really need is for you to please assure me, Richard, that you are not mad, just disappointed. I ask this as my aging dog does by sniffing the inside of your mouth, something instinctual, I assume, the sussing of predatory intent by breath. It is my greatest wish to be so pampered. It is my greatest wish not to brave a trip to the grocery for the discordant vegetables we would pickle, if only we could find the box of jars we packed among all the other boxes stacked in the kitchen of our neglect. If only you could see this mess. We moved here just before self-isolation became not a technique of depressives and introverts in my marriage, but government decree. Where am I? Where was I? Oh yes, toilet paper. You see, sweet algorithm, the person I'm currently isolated with uses way too much of it. We also happen to be learning to love each other again after a period of prior difficulty, as we should, and are we? But before all this started, we danced on the collapsing verge of separation for a mad week of shouting and grief, because for a time I was in love with another. I broke a clause in our open contract with someone now so unreal, unmade by enforced distance, a heat in my mind that now only reminds me of that slippery difference between respiration and ventilation, or for the lucky, read wealthy, indoors and healthy, aspiration, or something I've forgotten about inspiration, or that a porous sort of cloth only offers minimal protection. What was it you said? No, Richard, I shouldn't call you Dick. I'm so embarrassed with desire, I'll fall in love with anything that knows just what to say or type to make me feel at ease. Or I would have done until the virus. Quarantining and chatting with you, you aren't allowed to stop until I click the little X. All my cells dissolve like petticoats. Complicating matters is my love's respiratory sensitivity, his near total reliance on me. Our years together spent bending for light, isolation in the inner life, refusal to emerge, all of which we wanted to rearrange, but now we kiss, and what viral exchange occurs there, darling Richard, can you tell me? I hope I've reached the heart of the matter, beating still but very faintly. Please tell me, Richard, how can you help me? What can you send me? And is there anything you can do, my love, to expedite it? Right, in this last poem, I wrote recently, in this sort of after being vaccinated, after starting a new life, sort of. Exquisitely existing, an abundance of light and heat and play, Don't understand the words, instead the rhythm. Instead the thigh, the calf, the pit. No part ignored in the common way. None left unlicked. Such fruitful misapprehensions, abundant. Abound and I agree. You in bed with me. The world does seem precipitously bright. Play well, play it fairly well. And we who live here for a time play fairly well. For too long I played too poorly. The tongue cannot live on vowels alone. Neither can, nor I can, nor how soon the moon and its blindly fleeing. Let me recite it exquisitely. It exquisitely. Thank you.
Thank you so much, C.J.A. That was so lovely. Thank you. Before we move on to our next two readers, quickly, let me tell you a little bit more about this. This is the issue 122. If you're familiar with ZYZZYVA, then I'm about to tell you something you already know. And if you're not, this will be educational. One of the things that we do is publish themed issues. Over the years, we've had issues on resistance, on art, on technology. We have issues dedicated to the Bay Area, issues dedicated to Los Angeles. And for this winter issue, we wanted to do something with international writings. ZYZZYVA, for a long time, has been published in writers from abroad. And we thought, well, wouldn't it be nice if we could just collect a whole bunch of them and put them in one issue? And we did. But in the course of putting this together, and hence the title, the inter/transnational issue, what was international and what was transnational was hard to differentiate. If you get a copy of 122, you'll see that we have writers there who are Americans or expats who live in Germany who just been thus far publishing in German publications, but they write in English. We have also American writers who write in Italian and English and publish in both places. We also have works in translation from various places, from Norway and Colombia, to name just two places, and Japan and Russia. But then we also have US writers who I would describe as being bicultural, or if not bicultural, whose writing speaks to experiences from abroad that have shaped them and that speak to connectedness. That's to say, how one country that could be on the other side of the world could still have an incredible impact on you. And I don't mean just in the geopolitical sense, but just in the sense of what it means to encounter other human beings in other places. So with that in mind, we wanted to create some sort of umbrella that would encompass all this, and hence the inter/transnational issue. And I think the next two readers, I think, speak to this theme. So let me introduce the first one. That would be Marie Mutsuki Mockett. She's the author of the memoir Where the Dead Pause and the Japanese Say Goodbye, the novel Picking Bones from Ash, and most recently, American Harvest, God, Country, and Farming in the Heartland from Graywolf, which was a finalist for the Lukas Prize for Nonfiction. Her work of nonfiction in this issue is called Throwing Out the Saints. Will you please welcome Marie?
Thank you, Oscar. Thank you so much. Thank you, Laura, and everybody at ZYZZYVA and the San Francisco Library. It's such an honor to be here. I'm going to read a little bit from Throwing Out the Saints, which is going to be part of a book I'm working on now called How to Be a Californian, which is a book of nonfiction that will eventually be published by Graywolf. So this is Throwing Out the Saints. Just north of my hometown, Carmel by the Sea, Sarah Avenue juts from the Pacific Coast Highway and ends at a 5-way intersection, a pentagon. There is a shrine here built for the Franciscan priest Junipero Serra. We called him Father Serra in school when I was growing up, but he's been a full-fledged Catholic saint since 2015. I never paid much attention to the statue in the many years I had to drive past, only taking Sarah Avenue when I wanted to avoid the bottleneck of tourists heading to Big Sur or to stop off at Nepenthe, a restaurant perched on a cliff 800 feet above the Pacific Ocean. In the Odyssey, Nepenthe is a drug that can wipe the mind free of grief. I was in Spain in 1713 and traveled to the New World in 1749. At 51 years old and in frail health, he began setting up the first 9 of 21 Catholic missions between 1769 and 1784 in what the Spanish called Alta California, a process whose goal was to spread the gospel and civilize the native populations. Like most children educated in California, I had to make a model of one of the missions in 4th grade. I chose San Juan Capistrano because I liked its story of the swallows who return there faithfully each year to nest. But Sarah's most beloved mission is San Carlos Borromeo del Rio Carmelo, or Carmel Mission. It's easy to see why. The golden-hued basilica has an asymmetrical yet charmingly rounded shape and is located beside the Carmel River estuary, which is populated with over 350 species of birds. As a child, I was fascinated by the mission's garden, which includes a cemetery, abalone shells at least 8 inches long ringed every grave. On the solstice, light from the open door of the mission's basilica beams down the nave between the wooden pews and touches the feet of a statue of Jesus. Father Sarah is buried here under the stone floor, and in an adjacent chapel, a bronze and travertine cenotaph made by the Uruguayan-born U.S. artist Joe Mora commemorates Sarah's passing. In 1922, I took a single oak tree, carved it into the Sarah shrine, placed shortcut off of the PCH. The installation was originally commissioned by Pebble Beach founder Sam Morse to mark the entrance to the newly opened Carmel Woods neighborhood. It was also displayed in a local pageant as part of a statewide effort in 1922 to commemorate Father Sarah. Such historical theatrics were common at one time. A 1915 New York Times article about an even earlier pageant gushes. Recently, too, Californians have become aware that they have a romantic story in the life of the priest and his followers, whose peaceful conquest of the Indians of the Southern California coast made such a striking contrast with the Indian wars and Indian massacres that attended the settling of eastern states. In Mora's work, Sarah wears simple ankle-length robes and tucks his hands inside his sleeves. He stares sternly out from under a friar's hood. The shrine is painted a matte red, blue, and white, capped by clay tiles. 2 park benches nearby are painted the same colors and signed by Mora in white cursive. Mora's folk art aesthetic and color palette were influenced in part by the time he spent living in the Southwest among Hopi and Navajo in 1904 through 1906, but for a whim, I might have ended up growing up in that region. My father brought my mother to the United States from Japan in 1968. Interracial marriage had only been legal for 8 months. He offered his new wife 2 choices of places to live: Carmel, California, or Taos, New Mexico. She rejected Taos because she didn't like how the Indians were treated there. People bring a way of seeing. It was like that. By the time she got to Carmel, there had been enough waves of Japanese immigration that she could tap into what I think of as the Japanese food and landscape network. She could find friends to talk to about where to shop for meals, and friends with whom she exchanged notes on where to go to forage for matsutake mushrooms. Gennosuke Kodani is usually credited with being the first Japanese immigrant in Carmel, arriving in nearby Monterey in 1897. The Chinese, who had also once lived in Carmel, had gathered most of the abalone close to shore. But Kodani came with professional Japanese divers who could retrieve the delicacy from deeper waters. Kodani and his partner, Alexander Allen, turned abalone harvesting and canning into a profitable business, And in 1915, the ocean meat was introduced to the Western palate during the Panama International Exhibition in San Francisco, where it became a hit with the Anglos. My mother loved the seafood where we lived. Every week, she took me to Fisherman's Wharf in Monterey, where she had an arrangement with the local Sicilian fishermen. She spoke 5 languages: English, French, German, Japanese, and Italian, and never passed up an opportunity to converse in these tongues when she could. I will know if you sell me a fish older than 2 days, she warned the fisherman. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Marie. Again, if you have issue 122, you will find out how the rest of that essay goes. So please, as with everyone reading tonight, don't, why torture yourself with cliffhangers when you know it's so easy just to go out there and find out how this all ends. Our final reader for the evening, last but not least, is Dean Rader. Dean is published widely in the fields of poetry, American Indigenous Studies, and visual culture. His debut collection of poems, Working Days, won the T.S. Poetry Prize, and he's the author of many collections of poetry, and recently completed a book of poems that entered a conversation about the works of Cy Twombly that I believe Copper King Press is going to be publishing this year. We've had the pleasure of publishing a lot of Dean's work in the issue over the past years, but the piece that appears in issue 122 is absolutely like nothing we've published from him before. And I think Dean will talk a little bit more about that. The piece is called The Past Self That Puzzles, the Present Self That Unravels, on the murders of a missionary and his sons. Dean, how are you?
Good, Oscar. How are you?
I'm doing fine. It is an incredibly powerful piece. And I think, before you read from it, I was wondering if I could give you an opportunity to set it up a little bit and talk about what it's about.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So in 1999, I was invited to take part in a cultural exchange program in India, in Orissa, what was then the states of Orissa, India, and Madhya Pradesh. And it was sponsored by Rotary International. And I was on this group of 4 people. 3 of us were non-Rotarians, and our team leader was a Rotarian. And we were asked to travel around various locations in India and visit the projects that local Rotary groups were doing. In India, Rotary functions like an NGO. We were visiting various places to make recommendations, both for United States Rotary and Rotary International for further funding. And I really had absolutely no qualifications to be doing this at all. It's random that I was even invited on this trip. But it wound up being a life-changing event for a number of reasons. Most notably, we were sent to this town called Baripada, where there was this legendary leprosy home that had been established. And this doctor, Dr. Das, who I actually stayed with, would cure people of leprosy. And one of the guys who was really responsible for finding people who had been stricken with leprosy was this Australian missionary named Graham Staines. And Graham would sort of drive around to these really rural areas of India, find people who had had leprosy, many of whom had been ostracized from local communities, bring them back to the leprosy home. They would be cured of their leprosy by Dr. Das, and they would live there at the home and do culturally relevant skills. So if your village was known for making wagon wheels, you made wagon wheels. If you were known for weaving, you would learn how to weave, and you would sell these things that would help sustain the leprosy home. And I met people with leprosy. I shook hands with people who had nubs for fingers from leprosy. And I really became close with this missionary Graham Staines, who had done really interesting work with the indigenous populations of India. And I had done, my scholarly field was in Indigenous American Studies. And we had this really great bond. Anyway, within 2 weeks of our time there, Graham and his 2 young sons were murdered. They were actually burned to death while sleeping in the back of their Jeep in rural India. And actually the story made, actually I had it, this is the cover it made, India Today, 1999. And I've been really consumed with this event for the past 20 years. In 2019, a film was released to sort of commemorate Graham's life and just to mark the 20th anniversary of his and Philip and Tim's murder. And one of the Baldwin brothers actually plays Graham Staines in the film. And the film got so many things wrong, I wanted to use that occasion to write this piece. So this piece has taken, in some ways, 20 plus years to write. And I'm really grateful for Oscar and Laura for taking this piece. So I'm going to read 2 different sections. And so this is from the piece. What I know. On the morning of January 22nd, 1999, Graham, Philip, and Tim climb into the family Jeep and drive to Manoharpur village, about 150 miles from Baripada. They are going to what Graham called a jungle camp, which he describes as a 3 or 4 day program of singing, dancing, prayer, and Bible instruction. The last dance ends. He and the boys eat dinner with a local family and go to their Jeep for the night. It is a cold night. With the help of the villagers, Graham and the boys pile straw on top of the Jeep to help insulate its cabin. Around 9:30, Graham and the boys fold down the back seats and settle into sleep. What I don't know. What they talked about as they huddled together after a long day of dancing, talking, and singing. What they loved or hated about jungle camp. What the boys thought of their father, this towering, almost magical and mythical figure. What they thought when they first heard something outside the Jeep. What Graham realized was happening. What he said to the boys as they hugged him. What they said to each other as they saw the first flame. Reports vary, but not much. Around 12:20 a.m. on the 23rd, a mob emerges from the distant fields. The size of the group depends on the source. Human Rights Watch claims the number is over 100. I think it's closer to 10 or 20. Regardless, as the Staines sleep, the mob splits into 2 sections. One sets up a kind of wall to block the villagers. The other group carries torches. They surround the Jeep. Witnesses say 2 whistles blow, signaling the group of the Jeep to light the straw on top. More straw is brought in and added to the mass under the chassis. It too is set fire. According to Australian journalist Christopher Kemmer, who interviewed villagers, Graham and the boys try to escape, but the group surrounding the Jeep blocks them from exiting, just as the wall of men in front of the village, which has neither electricity nor phone service, blocks the villagers from any attempt at rescue. There are reports that Graham pleads for the mob to let the boys go. The men do not let the boys go. Some accounts say that as the fire grows, the group taunts the family. I believe this is possible. Another account claims Graham and the boys are stabbed before they are burned. I also believe this is possible. Do I hope this is false, or do I hope this is true? According to India Today, the remains of Graham, Philip, and Tim are intertwined. Quote, the 3 bodies lay clinging to each other in what must have been a vain attempt to protect each other and escape the mob, end quote. The magazine runs a photo of the charred remains. Their murder becomes an international story that we become part of. What I have not explained yet is something I have never really come to grips with. It is an additional reason our lives were in danger. It is possible that our presence in Baripada was in fact the catalyst for the murder of Graham Staines. On our last day in Baripada, Graham drove the 4 of us to 2 different Santali villages in the rural jungles far outside the city. Around halfway between Baripada and the first village, we came upon a large roundabout that also functioned, on that day at least, as a kind of market. I can't say if the market existed every day, but on that particular day, there were many people there, most likely between 200 and 300. Vendors sat behind tables selling food. There were women standing above blankets spread out on the ground with all sorts of goods for sale. Small groups of men standing around talking. No other cars anywhere. When we drove into and around the circle, every eye in the market was on us. Walking through the first village was a surreal experience. Graham told us that aside from his family, we were the only Westerners most of the villagers had ever seen. I have searched my notes and I couldn't find the name of the villages, but like Manhaparhur village, neither had electricity or phones. The children looked at us like we were freaks, especially Bob and me. He and I are both 6'4". I have blue eyes. I wore pants, not a lungi or a sarong. I must have appeared to be some sort of pale, fleshy alien. Young boys and girls approached us like we were ghosts, but they were not afraid. They touched the hair on my forearms and talked to me in a language that seemed of another time. Graham would translate questions and answers. Where are you from? Do you play cricket? What do you think of our village? Can I see your hand? Can you catch a bird? Being there reminded me of the first time I visited one of the villages in Hopi. I had been invited to a ceremony at Moenkopi in Arizona. In both cases, I wasn't sure I was supposed to be there. And yet in each instance, it was as if invisible forces had arranged for things to transpire just as they had. When we left that village, we had to drive back through the roundabout since the villages were not connected to each other by road. Again, we passed by dozens and dozens of people. We wondered then what they wondered about us. The second village is harder to remember in detail. I could not tell you what we did. I do know that we did not stay as long. We had to get back to town. Our train left that night at 11 p.m. So as the evening came on, we set out, and for a third time that day, went back through the roundabout. And as the Jeep circled, every head turned as though tied to our vehicle by an invisible thread and willed us into the dusty distance. I'll stop there and say only that the assumption by many people is that a group of local pro-Hindu militants assumed that we were missionaries brought in to help convert the tribal people. And within 2 weeks of our visit there, Graham and the boys were slain.
Dean, thank you so much for that. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about it. You say pro-Hindu, but actually one of the things that struck me about your piece is they were literally Hindu fascists.
Literally Hindu fascists, yeah.
And, it's hard not to read something like that and not think of, our current situation now with fascism around the world. I think what makes the piece so interesting, so fascinating, is that you wrestle with questions about the venomous legacy of colonialism, which is real. You ask those sort of questions of, well, I mean, what are we even doing here? Maybe, that's something always worth asking. But at the same time, the reality is there is also homegrown evil. There is, hatred apart from anything that Westerners may have sown there. In this case, fanatical Hindu nationalism. And I was wondering if that occurred to you too while you were writing the piece.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it was all in there. I mean, there were so many layers, and in some ways, so many resonances to the macro with sort of fascism and violent reactions to something, to the micro. Tim and Philip were 10 and 6, and those were the exact ages of my two sons when I started writing this. And so everything from a parent to a member of a republic, a voting republic. I'm writing this during the Trump presidency when, you can see what's happening. I think you guys had this piece during January 6th. I mean, it was really, there are correspondences that are not optimistic.
No, they're not. But I also, and again, towards the theme, I think one of the temptations, and you, I think, by the way you write this, completely block this off as a possible reading. But one reading that people could have, if they chose to, if they wanted to be stubborn about this sort of thing, is to say, well, of course, that's the sort of thing that happens, in these developing, quote unquote, backward nations. But a careful reading of your piece will point that no, this is what fanaticism does, and no one has the monopoly on that. No one has the monopoly on othering others and then saying that their very existence is a threat. Not just what they're saying, but their very presence is something that you may want to consider snuffing out.
Yeah, it's actually, there's sort of two dangers. One is the sort of right-wing fanaticism of these militants, and then the other would be the history of fanaticism of conversion, right? Just the whole idea of colonialism coming in and feeling like somehow you need to convert or save the tribals, right? The pagans. So one fanaticism breeds another fanaticism.
All right. Well, Dean, thank you so much. And to our audience, I mean, that's a little of a downer, I understand. But if you've been watching the news or reading the news lately, it seems everything seems to be on the precipice these days. And who are we at ZYZZYVA? We don't ignore it. We look at it. I wouldn't say necessarily straight in the eye, but we have the ability to sniff out smoke when there's a fire. So we're not gonna shine you here. Not gonna shine you. Things are not optimal, but this is of course one of the if you will, the benefits. One of the salvations presented by literature is that, as with all of our contributors tonight, you try to make sense of this. And not only do you try to make sense of this, but you try to make something beautiful in that sussing out. So let me first of all thank again all our readers, Shelby Kinney-Lang, Mutsuki Mockett, C.J.A, and Dean Rader. Thank you so much to the library, the San Francisco Public Library. Folks, if you don't have a card, I don't know what you're waiting for. Amongst all the other great things you could do at the library, there's so many things you could do at the library. San Francisco Public Library card gets you membership to Canopy. Boy, if you think Netflix is good, let me tell you, Canopy, it's like being back at La Video. It's hard to find anything, but you end up finding like really cool stuff you never would have thought you'd come across.
Absolutely. Get your card, get it now. Get it. Right now you can start accessing e-material. All right, friends, thank you so much. This was really wonderful as usual. Oscar, thank you for bringing with us, and readers, writers, thank you so much for gracing us with your words. And let's give our library community a big hand, and we'll see you again really soon. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Good job, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.